Parker Schnabel just pulled off the kind of discovery that could change everything. Deep in the Yukon, while chasing bedrock gold, his crew hit something no one expected: a sealed shaft vault, untouched for generations. When they cracked it open, what came out wasn't just gold, it was a $50 million fortune that stunned even Parker. This wasn't loose gravel or scattered nuggets. This was stacked, hidden treasure that someone went to incredible lengths to bury and protect. The kind of find miners whisper about but never actually see. The big question now is, who put it there? Why was it sealed off? And how much more is still down there? Because if Parker has just tapped into a forgotten gold reserve, this season of Gold Rush is about to become the most explosive one yet. Don't blink. This story is only just beginning. And before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more huge Gold Rush updates. The excavator's bucket hit with a sound that didn't belong in gravel. Not a crunch, not a crack. A hollow, dead thud that made the whole crew stop breathing for half a beat. When the dirt cleared, everyone saw it. Timber walls locked tight, bound with iron rivets, unnaturally preserved under frozen ground. This wasn't some collapsed prospector's tunnel. It looked deliberate, engineered, and the air around it felt heavier, as though history itself was pressing down on the site. Ground-penetrating radar lit up the monitors, outlining a cavity beyond the wooden face. A sealed hollow chamber, the kind of spacemen lock away when they want something hidden forever. The whispers started immediately. Vault, cash, fortune, and you could see Parker's eyes sharpen. He knew this was no ordinary find. This was the kind of discovery that rewrites entire seasons. But the closer they looked, the stranger it got. Carvings scarred the timbers. Symbols, initials, maybe graffiti from Stampede-era miners, maybe something far older. Dave Turin, always the cautious voice, muttered that shafts like these were often booby-trapped. Then came the metallic ring, a clear, unnatural clang from beneath the soil, echoing under the bucket's teeth. Something was buried there, plated, reinforced, and for the first time all season, the crew froze in place, staring at Parker, waiting for his call. He didn't hesitate. Where others saw risk, Parker saw destiny. Work pressed on, this time slow and surgical, every movement calculated. That's when structural experts revealed the real shock. The shaft wasn't built like anything from the 1800s. The walls were over-engineered, stacked with massive stone blocks fitted tighter than pioneer hands could manage. Seals of clay and pitch clung to the joins, a technique straight out of old European treasure vaults, not frontier Yukon. The camp buzzed with theories: Templar, Spanish, Russian expeditions gone wrong, but every speculation pointed to the same truth. This was no mine. It was a vault, and whatever had been buried down there, someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to keep it safe. So Parker gave the signal, and the drill bit whined as it cut into stone, then jolted free into nothingness. A sharp hiss burst upward, startling everyone on site. The air that rushed out was not the crisp Yukon chill they knew. It was stagnant, sour, heavy with a sulfur tang that clung to the throat. Crew members staggered back, gagging and coughing, some pulling shirts over their mouths. That stench carried a message. Whatever lay below had been sealed away untouched, not for years, not for decades, but for centuries. The hiss faded to an eerie stillness, and in the silence, no one moved. They all knew what it meant. This vault hadn't breathed since it was locked. Superstitions sparked like fire. A few men whispered about curses, about chambers deliberately sealed not to protect treasure, but to trap something darker. The hiss itself seemed alive, like a warning exhaled from the earth. Even Parker, never one to flinch, narrowed his eyes as if measuring whether they had just crossed a line that wasn't meant to be crossed. Instruments confirmed what instincts already screamed. Metallic density was stacked beneath them, something massive, not scattered traces, but weight, concentrated and deliberate. The site was no longer just a claim. They were intruders in a history that hadn't consented to be uncovered. And yet, the deeper they pushed, the higher the tension climbed, until every heartbeat echoed louder than the machines. Word of the find traveled fast. Investors, nervous and calculating, started calling. Their voices on the other end of the line were clipped with fear. Stop! Catalog it. Let professionals handle it. Don't risk the lawsuits. To them, this wasn't fortune. It was liability, an artifact that could be confiscated, seized, taken away from Parker's control. But Parker had already made his decision. With a jaw set like granite, he told his crew what he told his backers. Finders keepers. This is ours. His claim, his dig, his discovery. The reaction split the camp down its center. On one side were the terrified, the men who'd seen shafts collapse, who knew what greed did to judgment, who felt in their bones that this was a line no prospector should cross. On the other side, eyes glittered with feverish possibility. The thought that they were standing on a discovery that could eclipse every ounce Parker had ever mined. Fear or fortune, no one stood in the middle. Arguments cut through the cold Yukon air like blades, but Parker's voice carried above them all. His order was final. Keep digging, keep quiet, tell no one. From that moment forward, the vault wasn't just buried underground, it was buried in secrecy. And in secrecy, obsession thrives. The shaft walls gave up new clues as they were stripped back inch by inch. Strange marks appeared on the stones, symbols etched in patterns too sharp to be natural. At first they looked like crude scratches, but under the light of headlamps they aligned into crosses, angular and deliberate, the kind carved with intent. They weren't from pickaxes or accident. They were signatures, signs of ownership, warnings, or both. No one could agree. But one thing was certain. Whoever sealed this place wanted their presence remembered. Then came the tar. Thick seams of pitch clung to the stones, sealing cracks and joints, ancient engineering designed to keep air, water, and intruders out. Embedded in that sticky black substance were flecks that caught the light, tiny sparks of gold, not dust from contamination, but actual flakes, pressed into the seal itself, as though the builders had mixed treasure into the very glue that bound the vault. It wasn't sealing material, it was a message. Wealth wasn't hidden inside alone. It was in the very walls, mocking intruders with proof of what waited beyond. Parker ordered the old records pulled from Dawson City archives. Nothing. No survey maps, no mining claims, no frontier logbooks spoke of a shaft like this. It was absent from the written history, as though someone had gone to great lengths to erase its memory. This wasn't a prospector's tunnel left forgotten. This was buried deliberately, concealed by men who had the resources and secrecy to hide it. That realization tightened every chest in the camp. In the stillness of night, Parker replayed the evidence in his mind. The crosses on stone, the gold-laced tar, the perfect masonry, the engineered seals. He couldn't help but think of another place far from the Yukon. Oak Island, with its cursed money pit and centuries of failed digs. The parallels were undeniable. Booby traps, ancient engineering, whispered legends of Templar vaults, and Spanish gold. Now, here in the frozen north, was a mirror image. Different land, same story. A vault meant to be hidden, built to withstand greed, and destined to lure men like him into its grasp. Theories rippled through the camp. Some whispered, some spoken loud. Could this be Spanish treasure ferried north by ships lost to history? Could it be the work of Russian explorers sent east across the Bering centuries before? Or was it impossibly tied to the same elusive Templars Parker had watched the Lagina brothers chase across Nova Scotia? None of it fit, yet all of it seemed plausible, because the vault didn't belong here. It was foreign, engineered with knowledge and materials that didn't match the Yukon timeline. Standing at the lip of that shaft, Parker felt the gravity of it pulling him deeper. Not just into the earth, but into a story that stretched across oceans and centuries. He was no longer chasing ounces. He was chasing the truth of who had come before, what they had left behind, and why they had gone to such impossible lengths to keep it buried. With the decision made, the crew brought in the heavy iron, the hydraulic hammer that would test the vault's defenses. The hammer struck again and again, stone groaning under the punishment, until a fracture spidered across its surface. Dust clouded the shaft, grit settling into the crew's throats, and then, suddenly, it gave. A sharp crack, a final shudder, and the lining split open. Silence fell. The cameras swung in, catching a flash that didn't belong to stone or tar. It was gold, a shimmer locked in the dark, winking back at the lights like a secret finally set free. Then the impossible happened. Coins, dozens of them, poured from the fissure, tumbling down in a glittering cascade. They clinked and rang against the rock, the pure sound of fortune that froze every man in place. Parker himself, never short on words, stood mute, eyes wide, chest heaving as if the air had been punched out of him. The shaft filled with that eerie music, the unmistakable sound of wealth moving after centuries of silence. And yet everyone knew it was only the first breath of something far greater. They widened the breach carefully, hands trembling as the wall of stone peeled back to reveal the chamber's interior. The floodlights pierced the void, sweeping across shapes no one had dared to imagine. Stacked crates, row upon row, rested like bricks in a vault built with military precision. Their lids bore brands, insignias burned deep into wood so faded it looked ghostly, but still legible enough to prove intent. Each mark was an identity, a signature of whoever had sent them here centuries ago. The first crate pried open brought chaos. Inside were ingots, solid, heavy, stamped with crests of European kingdoms long dead. The markings traced back to the 1600s, unmistakable evidence that this treasure had traveled oceans, survived wars, and been hidden here in the frozen north. Gasps rattled through the crew as Parker lifted one bar with both hands, veins bulging, the weight undeniable. This was no miner's stash. This was empire gold. And the crates held more than bullion. Jeweled chalices glowed under the light, encrusted with rubies and emeralds, dulled only by time. Silver daggers lay in velvet-lined boxes, blades tarnished, but still lethal in their beauty. Navigational tools, astrolabes, compasses, sextants rested beside them, relics of explorers who had charted worlds before this land was even mapped. It wasn't just treasure, it was history, a museum entombed underground, sealed in darkness until the day Parker tore it free. The crew's disbelief boiled over into a frenzy. Men scrambled to secure the crates, shouting over each other, voices cracking with excitement and fear. Some dropped to their knees to scoop handfuls of coins from the dirt, their gloves clinking as if they'd struck personal fortune. Parker barked orders, but even his voice cracked with exhilaration. The vault had become chaos incarnate, gold and relics spilling into hands that had never dreamed of holding such power. And yet the scale of it dwarfed anything they could process. Expert calls were made in hushed tones, photos snapped and sent across encrypted lines. Preliminary estimates rolled back through the comms. The raw gold value alone soared past $50 million. Bars, coins, and nuggets, it was enough to eclipse Parker's entire season 10 times over. But then came the whispers of the relics, the artifacts whose worth was impossible to measure. On the black market, chalices like those could fetch hundreds of millions more, fortunes stacked on fortunes, wealth beyond comprehension. The discovery erased every line Parker had ever drawn between hard work and destiny. His usual calculus, yards moved, ounces recovered, fuel burned, suddenly felt absurd. This wasn't mining. This was rewriting history. His legacy wasn't tied to ounces anymore. It was tied to a vault no one else had dared to imagine. Overnight, his name had shifted from miner to legend, from prospector to discoverer of a hidden empire. The crew felt it too. In the shadows, they whispered about walking away, each man clutching his own piece, imagining a life forever changed. Dreams of debt erased, homes bought, freedom purchased with a coin or two from this forbidden hoard. And with every whisper, tension deepened. Parker's claim was no longer just dirt. It was a treasure trove that could shatter friendships, split loyalties, and lure betrayal from anyone desperate enough to take what wasn't theirs. But Parker, standing in the glow of floodlights that made the gold blaze like fire, understood something no one else was willing to say aloud. This wasn't about ounces. It wasn't even about dollars. He had unearthed something that didn't just rewrite his season. It rewrote the very story of the Yukon. What they had cracked open wasn't just a vault. It was a secret the earth had tried to bury forever, and secrets that big never stay buried for long. Rumors spread faster than gold dust in the wind. First it was whispers among rival miners, then chatter in Dawson's bars, and by the week's end, word of Parker's impossible find had reached ears far beyond the Yukon. Lawsuits were already being drafted in the dark. Rivals claiming rights, governments murmuring about heritage protection acts, agencies salivating at the chance to seize what they called national treasure. The vault's very existence was a liability, a ticking time bomb Parker could no longer deny. Fear dug its claws deep. What if they showed up tomorrow with papers? What if the gold vanished into crates marked with government seals and was spirited away, leaving Parker with nothing but dust and a memory? He wasn't about to let that happen. Security guards were flown in, armed men patrolling the perimeter by floodlight, their silhouettes stark against the icy night. But even that wasn't enough. Strange cars lingered on nearby roads. Figures appeared in tree lines, only to melt back into the dark. Something was closing in. This was no longer about mining or ounces. It was survival, a war over who would own what history had buried. The weight of secrecy pressed harder than the earth itself. Each man in Parker's camp carried not just gold dust on his gloves, but knowledge that could topple everything if leaked. Parker stood before them and swore aloud what he had already decided in silence. He would protect the hoard at all costs. If that meant defying rivals, ignoring court orders, or even standing against the government itself, so be it. This wasn't just about gold. It was about ownership of a legacy no one else had earned. Then came the curse. It didn't declare itself with thunder. It seeped in like rot. Machines that had run flawlessly sputtered and died. Hydraulic lines burst without warning. Lights flickered, drilling rigs failed, and the generators groaned like dying animals. Men were injured in freak accidents, steel snapping in ways that defied explanation. Each incident whispered of sabotage, but no proof could be found. The camp began to murmur the word Parker despised most: cursed. Old-timers came by, their faces etched with stories no one wanted to believe. They spoke of Oak Island, of deaths and collapses, and fortunes swallowed whole. They warned Parker he was meddling with something designed to destroy those who sought it. He brushed them off, jaw clenched, eyes burning with the same obsession that had driven him through every ounce of dirt in his career. But the whispers spread anyway, running through the crew like infection. Men looked over their shoulders, spat to ward off evil, and slept with charms under their pillows. Some wanted to quit. Some wanted to take their share and disappear. And yet Parker only dug deeper. Every broken machine, every accident, every warning, he treated them not as deterrents, but as tests. The vault wasn't just a chamber of gold. It was alive, a thing demanding sacrifice before surrendering its secrets. The more it fought him, the more he swore he would break it. The curse wasn't a threat. It was a challenge, and Parker Schnabel never walked away from a challenge. Finally, the day came when Parker descended into the vault alone. Floodlights bathed the chamber in pale brilliance, casting long shadows across crates and relics that had once belonged to kings. He stepped forward, reached out, and lifted a golden relic from its resting place, a chalice crusted with jewels that sparkled like stars trapped in metal. For a long moment he stood in silence, the weight of centuries balanced in his hands. The air around him felt charged, as though the vault itself was acknowledging him as its new keeper. It wasn't just gold, it wasn't just relics, it was proof. Proof that explorers had crossed oceans, that empires had touched this soil, that forgotten wealth had been buried in the frozen north long before men like him ever swung a pick. In that instant, Parker understood. He hadn't just struck fortune. He had uncovered a buried empire, a truth so powerful it could rewrite the history of the Yukon. 50 million in raw value was a number that dazzled men's eyes, but Parker felt the deeper truth. The worth wasn't in the gold, it was in the story, in the undeniable evidence of who had come before and what they had hidden. This was the kind of discovery that scholars would debate, museums would fight for, and nations would try to claim. And Parker stood at the center of it, a miner turned legend, holding history in his hands. As the crew's cameras rolled in silence, Parker's voice cut through the vault, low but sharp, a vow as much as a revelation. This changes everything.